Bevy from the levee had said she thought the bad times in Derry were over. But the more of it I saw, and the more I felt, that especially, the more I came to believe that Derry wasn't like other places. Derry wasn't right.
As some of you might know, I've recently started working my way through the Stephen King verse, and currently I'm reading 11/22/63, a novel about time travel, JFK, and the idea that the past pushes back when you try to change it. So far, it's a page-turner, and dare I say, I am enjoying it way more than The Shining. But what really stuck with me isn't the central plot line. It's a specific part of the book somewhere between 150 to 200 pages, when Jake Epping, also known as George Amberson, crosses into 1958 and drives into a small Maine town called Derry. Hey everyone, I'm Nikanak, and I make videos about everything I question and overthink, and today I want to explore why seeing Derry through an outsider's eyes might be the most disturbing way Stephen King ever lets us experience it. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, before we talk about what it means to experience Derry as an outsider, it's worth understanding why our protagonist, Jake, ends up there at all. Jake Epping is a high school teacher in 2011 when he reads an essay by a janitor named Harry Dunning, titled The Day That Changed My Life. Now, in that essay, Harry describes surviving a massacre in 1958, when his alcoholic father killed his mother and his 3 siblings with a sledgehammer, leaving Harry permanently injured with cognitive disabilities. Now, this essay really affects Jake.
It was when I got to the part about him crawling under the bed with the blood running in his eyes that I began to cry.
And becomes the emotional spark for everything that happens next. Not long after, a diner owner and somewhat of a friend to Jake, named Al Templeton, tells Jake that his pantry is actually a rabbit hole to September 9th, 1958. Al, who is terminally ill and determined to stop JFK's assassination, asks Jake to take over his mission. Now, before committing to altering history on that scale, Jake goes back in time to save Harry Dunning's family as a test run, to prove that he can alter the past and nothing critical and major will happen, and that decision leads him straight to Derry. He has a plan, he has rules, he even feels cautiously optimistic.
The sun was warm, the breeze ruffled my new short haircut, and the turnpike, nicknamed the mile-a-minute highway, according to the billboards, was pretty much all mine. I seem to have left my doubts of the night before sunk in the cow tank along with my cell phone and futuristic change. I felt good.
Until he sees Derry.
There was something wrong with that town, and I think I knew it from the first.
Now, I believe there are reasons for this, but I will get into that a little bit later. This revulsion is our first look at why the outsider perspective is so vital here. Jake hasn't learned to ignore Derry yet. He hasn't been trained into its cadences, and everything he sees and feels hits him raw. And that first reaction is that the town feels sick.
I came over a rise and saw Derry hulking on the west bank of the Kenduskeag, under a cloud of pollution from God knew how many paper and textile mills, all operating full bore. There was an artery of green running through the center of town. From a distance, it looked like a scar.
The whole town is just this depressing mix of black and gray under a sky-stained urine yellow. A local might just shrug off that rotting scent or the gloom in the air. A Derry mill worker might call it a Tuesday. That's why his fresh shock reveals the depths of the town's strangeness in a way a lifelong resident never could. Even Jake's car doesn't belong.
My cherry red Ford seemed like the brightest thing on the street, a distracting and unwelcome, judging by most of the glances it was attracting, splash of color amid the black Plymouths, brown Chevrolets, and grimy delivery trucks.
And that detail says it all. Any light or any difference is going to stand out like a sore thumb. And you know how in it, the kids gradually get used to how messed up Derry is? Jake doesn't get to do that, well, because he's an outsider. So he's thrown right into the deep end. Instead of it being a slow burn, he instantly notices the sour mistrust and the sense of barely withheld violence everywhere. It's way creepier because he doesn't have the luxury of adapting. And although nothing is happening to him yet, that's exactly the point. The town feels dangerous because of what the people aren't saying, which is why Jake keeps running into what he calls a veil.
There was a veil in Derry. I came to know that veil so well I could almost see it. The locals were on one side, People from away, like Fred Toomey, like me, were on the other.
Ask the wrong questions and people will retreat behind it. For instance, the bartender he meets tells him about murdered children, but only in fragments and only in a whisper, and always followed by reassurance. Jake hears about Patrick Hockstetter, who was found decayed in the Barrens, about Georgie Denbrough, his arm ripped off clean near a sewer drain, and yet the dominant hope that all these people have isn't justice or understanding, it's that whoever did this has moved on. And the horror isn't just the violence, it's the way the town forces people to forget. And we see this most clearly when Jake tries to do some actual research on Derry and the Dunning household. He heads to the local library and is told that the records are at the town hall, including census records and newspaper archives, which is already strange because usually those are some things that would be in a library, but they were moved conveniently. But when he heads to the town hall, the records are yet again conveniently gone.
"We had terrible rains last year," she said. "They went on for a whole week. The canal overflowed, and everything down in the low town, that's what the old-timers call the city center, Mr. Amberson, everything in the low town flooded. Our basement looked like the Grand Canal in Venice for almost a month. Mrs. Starrett was right. Those records never should have been moved. And no one seems to know why they were, or who authorized it. I'm awfully sorry."
It's once again another convenient excuse, but it's more than just bad luck. The town's history is literally being washed away, leaving Jake with nothing but dead ends. However, when Jake meets Richie and Beverly in the park, it is the only time Jake feels a bit of relief. And even then, calling it relief feels extremely wrong, because it's not relief in the sense that he feels better. It's actually more worse because now he knows the monster is real, but it's also the only thing that stops the spinning and constant questioning. And he looks at these two kids and sees the way they're leaning on each other, just completely drained. Even when Beverly tells him the bad times are over, he notices doubt in her eyes. It's as if she's trying to convince herself, not just him. And seeing the trauma from the previous year on their faces is the only thing that makes him feel sane again. And for the first time, Jake feels sure he isn't crazy. The people who fought the town's darkness are just tired and wary as he is, and after leaving Richie and Bev, Jake visits the ruins of the Kitchener Ironworks, where an explosion killed dozens of kids in 1906. Now, as an outsider, he can still feel the weight of what happened.
"I don't know for sure, but I can tell you one more thing. There was something inside that fallen chimney at the Kitchener Ironworks. I don't know what, and I don't want to know. But at the mouth of the thing, I saw a heap of gnawed bones and a tiny chewed collar with a bell on it. A collar that had surely belonged to some child's beloved kitten."
Then he hears a whisper from the darkness of a fallen chimney.
"Come in and visit. Time doesn't matter in here. In here, time just floats away. You know you want to. You know you're curious. Maybe it's even another rabbit hole. Another portal."
In an off year, the veil is always there, and something is always hungry. Now, remember how I said a little bit earlier that there's a reason Jake felt that immediate, visceral revulsion the second he hit Derry? Well, most people, be it from 1958 or 2011, would eventually just blend in. They'd see the grimy mill town, feel the bad vibes, and their brains would eventually smooth over the cracks just to survive. But Jake can't do that, because throughout the novel, it's hinted that he has the shine. Now, while Derry is protected by a veil of forgetting that forces adults to ignore the horror, Jake senses the truth immediately. He lives there for 2 months, long enough to tune out the airport noise, but the town itself never fades into the background. Instead, it starts to squeeze him.
How should I tell you about my 7 weeks in Derry? How to explain the way I came to hate and fear it? It wasn't because it kept secrets, although it did. And it wasn't because terrible crimes, some of them still unsolved, had happened there, although they had. It was a sense of impending failure that made me hate it. And that feeling of being in prison with elastic walls. If I wanted to leave, it would let me go, willingly. But if I stayed, it would squeeze me tighter. It would squeeze me until I couldn't breathe.
But because Jake can't, or rather won't, make that trade, the pressure only gets worse. He calls himself a temporal Bedouin, a traveler who never lets the roots take hold. In any other town, that's a weakness, but in Derry, it's the only reason he keeps his perception intact. And the longer he stays, the more he realizes it's not just that bad things happen in Derry, it's that Derry makes bad things happen. Now, by the time Jake leaves Derry, nothing has technically happened to him there that couldn't be explained away. He isn't attacked by a clown, he isn't injured by a clown, he isn't dragged into the sewers by a clown, he isn't even directly threatened by a clown. And yet Derry is the place he comes to hate and fear the most. Not because it keeps secrets, but because it doesn't need to. Because the worst part of it is out in the open, normalized, and absorbed into daily life. And maybe that's why this part of 11/22/63 sticks with me. Jake doesn't just pass through Derry. He shows us what happens when someone enters a place built on denial and refuses to go along. And in Derry, the most dangerous thing you can be is someone who sees it for what it is. But I want to know more, so if there is another novel where we get to see the town through an outsider's eyes like Jake, let me know in the comments down below. And if you're still here, thank you so much for watching. And now remember, the important thing is to never ever stop questioning. Even me. Till next time.